Skip Scope, how you going, brother?
Kempy, good to be back, brother. Team lists are out yesterday, and just like my rugby league career, sometimes when fans look and, unfortunately, Justin Horo's name is again on the team list. Unfortunately, you got me for the captain's run again, filling in for the great and powerful Cameron Smith, but very humbled to be back, mate, and looking forward to this show. Plenty of big news.
Oh, yeah.
None bigger than, obviously, Shaun Johnson's announced retirement.
Mate, Shaun Johnson announces his retirement at the end of the season. And I tell you what, if you ever were doubting, are we in the new era of rugby league? We are in the new era, and Shaun Johnson just capped it all off because he announced his retirement on his own sports podcast, the Play On Sports podcast. Who would have thought 15 years ago if you had said one of the biggest games ever played, like one of the biggest players in the game, would go on their sports podcast to announce it? Not on some huge press conference by the club, not some huge network. They go, no, I'm going to take control of the narrative. I'm going to do it my own way. And Shaun Johnson did that, and I love to see that with Shaun Johnson, which is really interesting because Benji Marshall definitely changed the game with his footwork and the way, almost like a touch footy player.
Yep. And
then Shaun Johnson was an evolution of that. And so he's always been on the forefront of being like a pioneer in certain things. And I think that, to my knowledge, one of the first, him and Peachy, I think Peachy also announced his retirement on a podcast.
Yep.
So that's really interesting. But we've actually got the audio from the podcast here.
There's probably a few moments along the way that have just been little alarm bells. I still want to compete hard. It's not like I've checked out already. So I don't want it to come across with what I'm about to say is that that's the case. When you have setbacks, they take its toll. Even like a couple of weeks ago, I was running and working my butt off to get back to a level where I felt like when I'm ready to go back, I'm going to contribute and I'm going to be that guy. But I was running, I remember just running like I was running these red line shuttles. And it's just a standard conditioning drill. But I'm running it, looking at the ground going, bro, I can't do this for another year. It's as simple as that. Not even I can't. It's like, I actually don't want to do this for another year. There's aspects of this decision where it's like, I know my body is at that breaking point that if I have one more setback, it's going to hurt deep, like really deep. Or playing through an injury just isn't fun or achievable for me anymore. That this year's shown me that.
What an incredible insight. What an incredible insight. Back in the day, it used to be like, hi, I'm here to announce my retirement. And then, journos would ask the questions, and there'd always be this kind of wall between the journalist and the player, and understandably so. It's not knocking that at all. What an incredible insight to hear that from Shaun Johnson, the mindset of his retirement. What do you reckon, Skip?
So good. And does that put a little smile on your face, Ken? Because me and you both come now, the success that we're able to have and be on a show and be with a brand like SEN comes from a podcast background, right? Where we've been grinding. You're one of the OGs. So to see the Play It On podcast and the Peach podcast through Tyrone Peachy announce such big things for both of those two players that are associated with and going to continue their own brands into the future. It makes me happy to see that part of it.
Yep.
With regards to the detail in which he talks about with retirement, I've heard that a number of times from a number of players that I've more personally had conversations with, and it reminds me of myself. Like at the back end of your career, you start to weigh up everything, a number of things. For the most part, I think the first box that gets ticked from a lot of players when they retire is health, like health of the body. How many times you keep getting hit and getting back up, and it just gets harder when you get to 30 plus. It just gets harder and harder to get up. And then you talk about rehabilitation. If you have serious injuries, that process gets harder. It gets boring. Like you're energetic the first couple, and it's sort of at times can be. I wouldn't say fun, but because it's all new to you, like, oh, you're in a rehab group and some of the older boys and you're mixing and mingling and you're getting specific training. And a part of that can be like, oh, it's actually not too bad, and you're not getting hammered by the head trainers out on the field while all the boys are getting dusted up. But as you get older, it gets harder and harder. And then you start looking at that white line as you're chasing it and you're doing certain drills out on the footy field and you're just like, how long does the body have left of this? And I love that he's got to that point because some players don't get that opportunity. Some players it gets taken away from them, whether it could be a talent problem where, teams are just not interested in you. And then that's the way you bow out of the game. Now, that's harder for some people. Some of it's like purely like actual physical injuries, like where you might do your ACL once or twice or 3 times and you're just like, I can't stay healthy. But it's not the mind telling me I can't be bothered doing this. It's actually my body. So that's hard as well. But it sounded like he is at ease with the decision, even though it's a tough decision. He would have had a lot of his friends and family a part of it. And what a great service to not only the game of the NRL, but specifically me being a Kiwi as well, what he's done for the Warriors and what he's done for New Zealand Rugby League. He's been one of our most polarising players.
I'd say it's basically like, and you have obviously on your podcast this award, but you lose the dog.
Yeah.
You lose the dog. And what I mean by lose the dog in you, when you're younger, you rock up and every day you're up for the fight. You're almost looking for the fight. When you're an 18-year-old, you rock up, and it doesn't necessarily mean an actual physical fight. It means like if the coach says to you, here's a fitness drill, you're going, oh, you want to break me? Let's see who breaks first. Or that's the mentality.
Correct.
By the time you get to 35 or 36 or 37, you go, oh, no, I don't care.
I don't want the dog.
Who cares? Yeah, you win, baby. You win. I'm out of here. I'm going to go lie on the couch. And so, I understand that mindset now with SJ. Talk about a highlight reel. I think that he doesn't get, I wish at some point he had won a premiership because I don't think he gets enough credit for the fact that he was at the Warriors and he went to a grand final when he was like 20, 21 years old. 2011, I think it was.
Yeah, first year, right? Him and Cherry, both first years.
Yep. And to get a team like the Warriors to a grand final as a 21-year-old, imagine if that happened today. Imagine the headlines that would be created today if it wasn't just a Penrith Panthers who built into it, who had this incredible system that built all these Origin players. We're talking about the New Zealand Warriors, who notoriously, the last grand final they won in 2001, I think it was, something along 2001, 2002. As a 20-year-old, he took them to a grand final. And I think that if he had just got one premiership, it would have shone a brighter light in a lot of the other things that he did. He won a golden boot.
Yep.
He'd taken it to Australian sides, like sides with Darren Lockyer in it, sides with future Immortals in it, SJ for the Kiwis. He'd torn them apart. And I think that he probably isn't talked about in that echelon of player because of the premiership question.
Yep.
And what I will say, though, is that I think he is one of the greatest Kiwi players of all time. I think that you'd probably have him, probably Stacey Jones, Ruben Wiki, those boys, he'd be in that echelon. I don't know where you'd put him, ahead or behind them. But I do think he's in that very, very small group of Kiwi players that you would consider greatest of all time.
Yeah, and what an honour for SJ too.
Yeah.
And you've got to throw in the OG SJ, like Stacey Jones.
Yep.
It's very similar.
Yeah.
Grand final, fell one game short. He's our little general. He dominated for 10 plus years as not only a Warriors when the Warriors first come into the competition, but for New Zealand, New Zealand Kiwis, he was always a great servant and similar to what Shaunie's done. So he's always going to be. Those two are always going to be compared.
Yeah,
they're the errors. Like when people discuss Nathan versus Joey with regards to New South Wales, and you start talking about accomplishments and all that sort of stuff, there's always going to be that conversation with wherever you sit on that, wherever it may be. Shaun, the two SJs are always going to be compared for sure. And you talked about 20 years old, a team that sort of surprised a lot of people during that period as well, 2011. A comparison for now would be Isaiah Katoa taking the Dolphins to a grand final. 21 years old, with a team that not a lot of people expected.
Yeah.
They were overachieving at one point, and then injuries have crippled them. But if they stayed healthy,
imagine what we'd be talking.
Imagine
about.
we'd say, exactly, because we're already talking about Isaiah Katoa.
Yeah.
But imagine if he took him to a grand final, how where we start. We always look at tiers, or we start looking at rankings.
Yep.
That's just the nature of sports in any sports. Then we start talking about Isaiah Katoa in the same breath as we probably did with Shaun Johnson early on in his career.
I think the most impressive thing for me with SJ's career, the stepping and the footwork and the flick passes, don't get me wrong, that's super impressive. But that was who he has always been coming through the grades as a touch footy player. So it's almost like being impressed with a player that's extremely fast. Like that's their one asset. That's what they came through the grade as. So you can be impressed with it. But what impressed me the most about Shaun Johnson's career was he got to a point where his strength that had been his point of difference his whole career. He could no longer do that because he'd got a bit older. And a lot of players just fade out. That's the end of their run. He decided to go, no, you know what? I'm going to work on all the other side of things. And he finishes his career as not the flashy player, as the very structured 7, a good kicking game, can lead a team around the park. And obviously we saw what happened last year with the prelim with the Warriors. So, like, he gets them to the grand final with the flashy stuff.
Yep.
He gets them, 10 years, 12 years later to a prelim with all the structured stuff. That's a pretty incredible feat. 2 different styles of 7s. He managed to get them near a grand final or to a grand final.
Yeah, great point. And this is where the comparisons is going to now. This is where he's going to be compared to Benji in this way, right? And those are the 3 main guys. When we talk about halves for Kiwis and New Zealand Māoris, you look at how Benji reinvented himself at the back end of his career with specifically South Sydney and the role that he played there, and how he had to tweak his game. So I wonder if if you ever got the opportunity to have a chat to Shawnee, I wonder if he watched Benji closely at the back end in those last couple of years at Rabbitohs and went, all right, very similar. We could not only beat teams by ourselves with regards to plays that we come up with during a game, but beating individuals through the first 5, 6, 7 years of our career. The way that Benji transformed his playing style at the back end is very similar to what Shawnee's been able to do. Now, the difference between what Shawnee and Benji did is Shawnee was still the dude, whereas Benji played sort of that fill-in role with Rabbitohs because they still had Adam Reynolds and Cody Walker. Yeah. So the mentor, he was more of a mentor, you'd say, Benji. Whereas Shawnee, he gets to go out in his terms, being the starter for the Warriors. And like I said, there's going to be conversations with regards to some of the best Kiwi playmakers that we've ever had, and it's going to be from, obviously from the NRL era anyway. You're going to have Stacey Jones, Benji Marshall, and Shaun Johnson, and that's it.
You know what? You want to hear a Smokey?
Okay, Smokey.
Hughes.
Ooh, I like it. Yeah, see,
he flies under the radar all the time.
You know what?
Won a premiership.
He goes under the radar so much. Yeah,
he was a part of the team that beat Australia 30-0.
Yep, he was. Him and Dill Brown.
Hey, just throwing it out there.
Yeah, good shout. Oh, he's one of those. He's one of the more
so under the radar,
forgettable players, and I mean that with all due respect.
But he doesn't play. Hughes. He plays highlight reel stuff too.
Yeah,
he's so, I think it's his personality is so unassuming, he's so humble.
Yep.
You just don't kind of see it. But yeah, Shaun Johnson. And another thing I love about SJ is I had him on my podcast years ago, and before he rocked up, I honestly just had in my mind a totally different person to what, I thought he'd be this kind of, have a bit of almost like swagger about him, be, he's Shaun Johnson.
Yeah, of course.
He's Shaun Johnson, and I expected that. And sometimes when you play footy and you've been in squads with some of the best of all time, you just get used to that. Like, there's a bit of arrogance, there's a bit of swagger, and they deserve it. They've earned it.
Yep.
He walked in. He couldn't have been more. He was so interested in what I had to say that I was like, bro, I'm not that interested. You're the interesting one. Let's talk about you.
Yeah.
But it was just a sign of, first of all, a really intelligent guy.
Yep.
Far more intelligent than you give him credit for. And just a really down-to-earth, humble guy. So I'm such a fan of Shaun Johnson. And I'll tell you what, I think that his career is, always be remembered as incredible. But with the looks, with the podcast, with everything after footy, I think that he'll go down as one of the better pundits in rugby league.
Yeah, and I've been lucky enough to be ex-teammates of players like Louis Brown and Felipe Mateo, and you just what you're saying there with regards to how he is not only a footy player, but how he is a teammate and a human. They say all the same things. They vouch for him when the outside, when you sort of look at Shawnee Johnson from afar, those two boys in particular have always echoed what you just said about Shawnee. That's the guy he is. So, got a great reputation around the league and by his former teammates.
Before we head to the break, I'll never forget I was at the Warriors and all the first graders, they're like, you've got to see this under-20s player down at training tonight when we're down there. Go and have a look at him. It was Shaun Johnson, just absolute clinic. And we were just all talking about this young guy that, could be anything. Ended up being
little deuces, little goosies.
Oh, man. Seriously, I'm going to get too excited. The Bulldogs, something special brewing there. And I glass half empty kind of guy. You look at the teams that went really well last year that are struggling this year. Where I think the Bulldogs might be different to those sides is they had so much pain last year. And what I mean by so much pain is that Seraldo was so focused in on what he wanted to build that he was willing to burn the whole house down and rebuild from the ground up. And that's where I think Seraldo may be different to some of the other teams that have been in and out of the top 8. I think the fact that he was willing to just completely remove a whole squad essentially and bring in guys that believe in his system, that's where I think they may be. Now, will they have as crazy a year as they've had this year? I'm not sure. But I actually think that they will consistently be in the 8 going forward, or barring a bunch of injuries or whatever, because Seraldo, the guts it took last year, when everyone was starting to go, this guy was the most highly touted assistant coach of all time, literally.
Yeah.
He comes in his first year, has the worst defense, or at least it's a second or it's one of two.
And that's supposed to be his bread and butter.
Defense was the systems that you see at Penrith and that the Warriors use, and now at the Bulldogs, that was all created by Seraldo. He literally created the system used at Penrith. So he comes in, he is so focused in on his vision that he has the worst defense in the history of the club. Everyone is sitting there going, Seraldo is not who we think he is. He still stays the course, and this is the result. I think it's one of the greatest showing of mental fortitude that we've seen by a coach in a very long time.
Yeah, some really good points there. I got the opportunity to meet Cameron Serrato, probably more on a different level, being at a golf day halfway through the Mick Fanning golf day, and had a really good in-depth chat to him during that period, away from anything content related, and just so impressive. I think a number of things that you mentioned there, staying the course, understanding his principles is the person that he is and the coach that he is, which is going to serve him well, like he said, long term. One thing, or one person that he highlighted who has been important for what he's doing there is Jason Taylor. He reckons Jason, when they first pitched the idea of Jason Taylor to come on, it was like a little bit, he had no relationship with him at all. And he reckons that's been such a positive because he looks at things so much more differently than what he had looked at before with his systems being at Penrith. And off the back of that, and this is I think the best part of any coach is the league continues to change in any sport all the time. And I think the best coaches, Melbourne, the perfect example, and Craig Bellamy, find out what your roster is and then coach them accordingly. When you look at how many times they have been proposed or associated with free agent middles on the market, whether it be Tino early in the year, whether it's Adam Fanua-Blake when he was negotiating, whether it was Terrell May from the Roosters, everyone keeps saying, they're looking for a middle, they're looking for a middle. I still think they're looking for a middle. Stefano, great example. But instead of worrying about getting this big alpha male that all the top teams have got, he's completely changed his style. I don't think going into the start of the season, this is the style of footy that they would have, or probably actually go further back. I reckon pre-season he would have figured out what his squad looked like, and therefore he's coaching them a certain way. It's nowhere near what Penrith are like offensively.
No way.
If anything, it's the polar opposite. Power game, Isaiah Yeo dropping players underneath with Fisher Harris and Moses Leota and Spencer Leniu of years past, creating those quick play the balls. Now it's movement, short hands, small ball. And there are teams now, like I said, this is a copycat league, like all sports. Now you actually see other teams going, that actually works all right. Bailey Hayward and Kurt Mann through the middle, smaller guys, really good line speed, and then tipping on to their bigger-ish players in the team to create more go forward that other teams just use by sending 120-kilo front rowers straight into the line. Well, I think that's been probably the most impressive part for me in what Serrato's done with the Bulldogs this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you can tell that they're the fittest team in the comp. You go and look at their missed tackles. They actually miss a lot of tackles due to losing the contact. But their scramble is unbelievable. They're a team. The Bulldogs are a team whose feet are always moving. Always moving. And I think that even look at guys like Karaz and that. These guys are always engaged in the game. It was always my pet hate when I'd watch teams where, like, say the ball was on the other side, and you'd see, like, edge forwards kind of just walking, and their body language wasn't engaged in the game, even though the ball's away. Whereas you watch the Bulldogs, very rarely do you see feet stop moving. And I think that's one advantage that they had. I mean, I think the Bulldogs game against the Broncos was genuinely a perfect kind of just a little slice of the way the Bulldogs want to play at their best, which is moving the ball side to side and saying, okay, we might not have the forward pack that you have with Payne Haas, with Carrigan, but at the same time, there's some drawbacks to having a big, explosive forward pack. It's the fact that you're not that good laterally, and also, obviously, the Broncos' edge defense isn't the best. I think it's a great point in regards to Serraldo looking at his squad and going, okay, we're not. What's a positive of not being the biggest team in the competition? I'll tell you what a positive is you can move better than any team in the competition. And that's what they do. That's what they do. So, look, we're going to head to a break. The Doggies, I cannot believe how good they're going. I absolutely love it. And after the break, we're going to talk about a team who is having probably the most disastrous year in the entire competition. The Broncos get absolutely belted by the Titans, 46-18. Scope, I'm just going to leave you the floor, mate. I'm not going to say my opinion because I would love to hear a fresh scope opinion on what's gone wrong with the Broncos.
All right. So we were texting each other within our group at Levels Network, involving myself, Willie Mason, and Lukey, who does some work for us behind the scenes. I wrote in the group at 18 to 10 up, the Broncos are shot in this game. And the reason I wrote that, number of reasons. The body language, they clearly look frustrated in certain aspects of the game. This is, I don't think the Reece Walsh, Corey Oates era where they end up having a blowout had happened up until this point as well, actually. I think
that was the second half.
That was the second half, wasn't it? A couple of things I noticed. Frustration amongst the playing group. Frustration, it seemed like, from Walshy leaving the field when he had an interview with Lara. And then by the time it got into the dressing room, I messaged the boys and was like, Titans are going to roll them. I honestly thought that. And the reason I thought that is, like, players weren't engaged. There were levels of frustration that might have fallen over from last week's performance, as would have definitely been a part of it. But I think, what's happened through the week and all this building of pressure, not only amongst players, but amongst coaching staff and captaincy being critiqued, it's all led to a really frustrated club from top to bottom, players and coaches. And I think there's some alignment missing there for sure right now. And this is a huge game coming up this week against the Cowboys, who, just like the Gold Coast Titans, despite some recent success, have always been viewed as the little brother. And when you get an opportunity, like the Titans did, to take a swipe at Big Brother, and Cowboys are fighting for a top 4 position, I think this could get quite ugly for the Broncos this week. I really think it could. And it just looks like, for a number of reasons, like I stated, that there is going to be some really big conversations in-house moving forward for the Broncos. But as a Broncos ex-player and obviously now a fan now, how are you, mate? How's the last couple of weeks? Must have been rough.
So rough. So rough. I mean, obviously always, back the boys in, no matter what, whether they're coming last or first, always a Broncos fan through and through. I think a big mistake they made this year was putting too much emphasis on Reece Walsh needs to lead us out of any bad situation we're in. Reece Walsh needs to do everything for us. Reece Walsh is our superstar. I think that they've gotten ahead of themselves and they've conflated Reece Walsh is our superstar, therefore he's our leader on the field. And Reece Walsh is 21 years old.
Yep.
And I think that a guy like Reece, it's unfair. Like, he's going to want to be the leader. He's going to want the ball as many times as possible, all that kind of stuff, because that's who he is. He's a star. But he needs leaders around him to funnel his energy, to put it in the right direction. And on the weekend, it was a perfect example of, you saw the brilliance of Reece Walsh, and then you saw the negatives of Reece Walsh having all this pressure on him to win the game for him. He scored basically 2 of the tries with just all Reece Walsh brilliance. And then the second half, you saw the blow-ups with Corey Oates, you saw other, kicking on the first, all that kind of stuff. And I just think that there's no system in place for Reece Walsh to fall into and play a role. Rather, it is more along the lines of, we'll defend as hard as we can, even though the defence has fallen off a cliff. And that's the difference. Last year, they had the second best defence in the competition.
Yeah.
So they could afford to go, we'll just defend our asses off and give Reece the ball. He'll make 5 errors a game, but 3 of them will be tries. This year, their defence is it's
nowhere
honestly
near.
fallen off a cliff.
Yep.
So you've got this situation where they're leaking more points. Reece Walsh is chasing more points. And I think they're finding right now that Reece Walsh right now needs guidance. I actually feel a bit sorry for Walshy because he's going to cop all the brunt. And look, I get it. He's a superstar.
Yep.
But at the moment, there's not enough guidance around him. There's not a system that he can fall into. Like, for example, if he went to Melbourne or Penrith or the Roosters, he would slot straight into a system and he wouldn't have to think. There'd be no pressure. Like, the pressure would be there, a normal pressure, but it wouldn't be like, oh, Walshy, we need you to win us the game. There's essentially no one in that Penrith side or Storm side week in, week out, where they're going, mate, we need you to win us the game. So I think there's that. I think also, I think that is an environment has almost been created where, because Walshy and Selwyn Cobbo are such superstars that do these crazy things, that they make these errors, and then other young fellas go, oh, well, I get to do that too.
Okay.
I get to kind of just play the way I want, do whatever I want and whatever I see. And they're not Selwyn Cobbo and they're not Reece Walsh. So I think that there's plenty of things to look at. I think that our systems need improving. I think game plans need improving. But most of all, before all of that, defense needs improvement. You look at the Bulldogs and you look at the Broncos on paper. The Broncos on paper, side-wise, is a substantially better side. But a champion team will beat a team of champions any day of the week.
Yep.
And that's what the Bulldogs are. And guess what the cornerstone of the Bulldogs season has been? Their defense.
Yeah.
They're the second best defensive side in the competition. And they've been like that all year long. And I think with the Broncos, like, you'd go back to the weekend, we had players like genuinely just like getting bumped and just falling off tackle. Like, the contact was there. There was no, they weren't getting gassed or beaten by speed. And so I think defense and better systems in place to guide our superstars need to be implemented at the moment.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a bit of a take earlier on the week. Have we got audio here of Kevin Walters defending Adam Reynolds, Maestro? Well, I had a chat about this. I thought last week, there was an opportunity for Kevy to, you talk about leadership, right? And you talk about young players. Whether any team, when you've got a talented team and things aren't going well, there's probably 3 people in the organisation that are going to cop it more than anyone. It's going to be the coach, the captain, and the star player.
Yep.
So you've already mentioned Walshy. I thought last week, with all the noise that was around the captaincy and that, I thought Kevy really missed an opportunity to really dig his heels in and really support Adam Reynolds a little bit more. And when I was watching that game and I was looking at the frustrations around the playing group, I think that plays into a number of things that are also happening there. Like, could have been a really good opportunity to galvanise the team, as in some great teams that we know of in the past, backs against the wall. It's us against everyone mentality. I thought that was missed throughout the week. And then that's what when I was talking about the body language, if I'm looking at the frustrations that the playing group have got right now, and therefore the leadership to be able to chip a player up, when you have cohesion between the head coach and the captain, they're strong in their beliefs. They then pass it down to the younger players and even the star players. Therefore, you might not see that massive seesaw of performance where you have something so great like Walshy's able to do, but then also the frustrations that build in when things don't go his way. So I thought that was pretty evident in the game on the weekend. And like I said, it's not going to get any easier this week because the Cowboys, they'll be looking at this situation, not only, worried about trying to cement a top 4 position, but you know what it's like when you feel like a team might be down in the dumps and you just want to put your foot on the throat even more so.
Well, and the problem with the Broncos is they haven't been playing like a team with their backs against the wall. Like, I haven't seen them galvanise together. If anything, with all the pressure that's been put on, the pressure has seemed to separate them as a team. Like,
That's fair.
They seem to be playing individually rather than going, we're in this together. Boys, they're against us as a team. And so, look, unfortunately, I do think there's pressure on. There's going to be pressure on. Okay, what are they doing at training? Why was their defence so good last year and not good this year? What has changed? The roster hasn't changed that much. Like, obviously, Flegler, Catewell, Herbie, and Palacia left, but that doesn't stop blokes from defending really well. Like, that doesn't stop, blokes from being able to like as we said, look at the Bulldogs roster on paper. They still defend to the death. So
it's funny when you think about those guys, prioritising guys that are mid-range, and then, looking at guys who are younger with a whole heap of potential, like Walshy and Ezra. There's that fine balance with recruitment and retention,
sure.
right? Like trying to get. You look at Herbie and Flegler, you could see. I know Flegler's injury has sort of hurt us a little bit this year. Capewell's a bit of an outlier where he's a bit of a journeyman. He brings experience, and
I think they miss Capewell a lot
for sure.
Not necessarily his performance on the field, but his leadership off it. I think
correct. Yeah, I agree with that. But those guys who are mid-range, who are like, all right, like Flegler and Herbie Farnworth are really important, good players, but they're probably going to be at this level, probably not going to shoot up or go get much better in years to come. Whereas when you look at some of the other guys that they were looking at prioritising, guys like Walshy and Ezra Mann specifically, those two guys, like even though they were great last year, like they can get even better. Like they can go even better. So, the recruitment, the retention, it's so crucial to the success. You look at the teams like Penrith and Melbourne and how they identify, all right, is he a core player long term?
Yep.
And therefore, can we build a team around him? Like, do you take a little bit off of potential and lock in someone that's going to be rock steady?
Yep.
And now, like, when you look at where they are sitting on the ladder, those conversations come up a lot more. Parramatta's another good example. Yeah. Players that they let go in the past couple of years.
Absolutely. We are here for Chemist Warehouse. Get discounted prescriptions and save more money at Chemist Warehouse. All right, Storm ramp up Papanhuyzen talks. Papanhuyzen looms as top free agent. Goes to the market November 1st, start of the final year of his Storm contract. This week, Storm owner Matt Tripp, speaking to the Sydney Morning Herald, said, "We hope to have something done soon. Discussions are just starting. But when both parties are keen, you usually get there. Hopefully it's in weeks, not months." Papanhuyzen is reportedly set to be on $800K for his final year. Is that close to his current value on the market? Yep, all that good stuff. Speak to me, Scope. Thoughts, mate?
I'm trying to put a price on Pappy. It's a tough one on talent and availability. And if he plays game in, game out, that's unders for what he's capable of and how important he's been for that Melbourne Storm team. Not only this year, but in years past where he's won a Clive Churchill for him. But with regards to injury and missing a whole heap of footy, like the value for being on that number for the last couple of years, that's a significant chunk to have out of your salary cap. And the Melbourne Storm carrying that.
And they've got far longer on their books.
Yeah.
On their books. It's such a tough one with Pappy because...
What would you do? What if just say in the perfect world you've both agreed he's happy with 800, you're happy with 800 as a club. Do you think that's the right number?
So 800, did you say?
800,000 per year, because apparently that's going to be the final year.
Look, I think 800 is about right in the new salary cap.
Yep.
My only concern with Pappy is if it's just injury. That's the only question.
That's it, right?
That's really it, because non-injury free. Absolutely.
That's unders if
he's
injury
at
free.
his best.
But you have to consider it, right?
Yeah, it has to be considered. And I love Papanhuyzen and his defence. A lot of his injuries are purely it can't be helped. Sometimes an injury could be soft tissue, and the soft tissue injury because you didn't do your ice baths, you didn't stretch properly. Are you overweight? Have you been eating correctly? There's a lot of things that can go into soft tissue. Now, to be extremely clear, next time you see a soft tissue injury, don't automatically assume it was because he wasn't doing all the right things. But there are other injuries that are purely from, contact, hip drops. And when you look at Pappy, most of his injuries have been purely from...
the Jack White one's the obvious one.
Yeah, you cannot, avoid it. And so I think that Pappy, a lot of the other Storm players, he flies under the radar. Yes, is he as explosive as he was a couple years ago? Probably not. But I do think his ball playing is phenomenal. And I think that you got Fa'alongo, he signed long term and he's at the club long term. But don't be in a rush, because what Fa'alongo does with his feet and how good he is, how explosive he is, that is awesome. That is really good. But I think Pappy's ball playing and leadership at the back, his ability to get defensives right and all that kind of stuff, I think that Fa'alongo is still quite a ways away from that. So if you're going to try and play hardball with him because you have Fa'alongo ready to go, or to a degree ready to go, I don't think that's probably a smart decision. I think that if you're the Storm, you look at it we either believe that he's going to play as many games as we hope, which is 25 a year or whatever, or we don't. I think that if you're making the decision on well, actually, we've got far longer in the wings, so we don't have to offer him as much. I think that's where you might get caught up in making the wrong call.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. An underrated part of Pappy's game because he's such a game-breaking support player, and
Yep.
Everyone remembers the flying mullet a couple of years ago, just flowing through the middle of the field, supporting up the middle. But he definitely opens up. For me, if the Storm are to go on and win this comp or go as far as possible, he's the key.
Yeah.
Every team's third, fourth, fifth best player are super crucial in this day and age. And you look at, obviously Penrith being the prime example with Nath, Isaiah Yeo, and probably Dylan Edwards, but they get Jerome Luai chipping in every now and again. And now it's crazy to even think that they had Stephen Crichton chipping in with big moments.
My God.
So Munster, Jerome Hughes, and Harry Grant are going to be, they've been the consistent now for 3 years why Pappy's missed a lot of footy. And they're going to be a big part of what they do. But if Pappy can come up with big moments and big games, I think he can be the difference in how far the Storm go this year.
I do think this is one of the rare instances where if you said to Pappy, mate, we've stuck by you, you've kept your contract, we've given you opportunity after all the injuries you've had.
Yeah.
Where I do think Pappy probably, out of loyalty to the Storm, could take a couple $100,000 less.
Over the course of a 2 or 3 year deal?
So, for example, let's just say other clubs can offer him $900K a year.
Yep.
And the Storm go, we'll give you $750.
Yep.
I reckon he should say, you know what? You've been really, unless there's something that's happened behind the scenes we don't know about. Yeah, let's say they've been as rock solid as outwardly we look like they have been. I think that's where you could probably say, Pap, could you take a little bit of a haircut because we have been so good to you over the last few years? Because I'm telling you right now, there are so many clubs that would have, when he got that, like the big injury at the end of last year or whenever it was, that would have treated him so poorly and pushed him out of the club. Yeah,
there would have been frustration, right? I think it was the Broncos game in the last round when everyone rested their players, right?
Yep.
Remember that? The ankle injury. You're right. I think that'll be, the way that they're talking makes it sound like from owner Matt Tripp that they're in really good communication with Pappy. He's one of their favourite sons.
Yep.
He does everything right despite the injuries. He would have been one of the hardest workers in the club trying to get rehab on the number of injuries that he's had. And they've always done a really good job of managing expectations and relationships. You think about, we're here for the captain's run for Cameron Smith's show. Like, he had Cheese and Harry Grant behind him during a period where, for any other team, players of that talent would have been going, I need to be in here, I want to be the guy. They manage that really well. They always have.
Yep.
And they've been...
I think it's because they communicate really well.
They must be.
Yeah.
There must be. There must be clear definition in their roles within the club, the opportunities that might arise if something was to happen like a Saw Farlongo. But I think in any other club, other than probably Penrith and maybe the Roosters, Saw Farlongo doesn't see the long-term plan.
Yeah.
Like, he looks at his talent and goes, no, come on, I don't want to sit behind Pappy again for another couple of years. But I reckon Melbourne are probably the best clubs at doing that, being able to go, all right, this is why we're rewarding Pappy for the services that he's given to the club if they do indeed extend him. And therefore, Saw goes, all right, that's cool. That will happen to me at the back end of my career at the Storm. And that's why I think the Storm are so great, and they do a really good job of managing these relationships and these contracts.
Yeah, so I think it'll get done, and I think that people aren't appreciating how good Pappy is. I think they've forgotten that this guy is not just like a decent fullback in the NRL, he's a top-tier one. Like, we're talking, there was even pressure on Tedesco's position at once from Pappy. And I think that we're going to, as long as he stays on the field for a long period of time, Pappy's going to remind everyone, no, I'm a top-tier fullback. And I think that we'll see them resign. Pangai Jr. reportedly commits to the Catalans. Career Mail's Peter Bedell reporting that Pangai Jr. has agreed to a one-year deal with French club Catalans Dragons, resisting the urge to follow his trusted mentor, Supercoach Wayne Bennett, to Sydney. With the Rabbitohs battling salary cap, Bennett can't recalibrate South salary cap sufficiently to accommodate Pangai Jr., who's off to France to play alongside Roosters Catalans-bound playmaker Luke Keary. Right move for Tavita Pangai Jr. Look, I find this one interesting because, if the Dolphins have offered him a decent wicket and he's gone, nah, I'm off the Catalans, that sucks for the Dolphins. They give him this mad lifeline to play NRL again, to show his wares on the best stage, and then he just goes, nah, see you later. But I'm going to assume that the Catalans were the only ones offering him a deal. I'm going to assume that. What do you reckon?
Oh, as in the Dolphins weren't offering him anything?
I have to assume that.
Yeah. Well, you look.
Surely he wouldn't do that to a club that's given him a lifeline the way they did.
Well,
Dolphins.
maybe a big part of it too. Like I've always said this: if I was to engage in negotiations or contract talks with Tevita Pangai, you got to be really committed, or you've got to have the runs on the board. So for me, when they were talking about him returning to the NRL after leaving the Bulldogs, there's only two teams that stood out. It was the Dolphins and the Melbourne Storm for me for Tevita. As you know, I'm a Catalan Dragons great. Spent a couple of years over at the Catalans. Look! It was a really cool experience to be over there, mate. The unders and overs for Tevita, even though, don't get me wrong, I rate Tevita as a player. I rate the club. It is one of the biggest trap clubs over there in the Super League because it's just completely different to anything that you experience here. Now, there have been players that have gone over and had really good careers. You even think about what Mitch Pearce has done there in the last couple of years. And I think Luke Keary is going to do the same. He's going to go really well and he's going to be beloved there. But there are so many temptations over there. The lifestyle can get a little bit cruisy.
Beautiful
like
place.
For me, there's no in between with Tevita. It's 4 games or 4 years. Like he could go over there.
Be a hero. They could build a statue of him
because they love their enforcers too.
Okay.
Like the French fans, they're so funny. And if he scores tries and he belts people over there, then he's going to be beloved and they'll extend him and like I said, he'll be 3 years. Or there's a world in which like they get. Because you don't know what they're saying. Like, at least when you get dusted over here by your own fans or whatever, you know what they're saying to you.
Tevita knows French.
Yeah, well, I'm sure he'll be picking up on his en français on the way over there. But it's a different experience when you're getting pizzled from your own fans in a different language. I'll tell you that much. I've lived it, Tevita. So it's a wait and see, mate. I'm so intrigued to see what happens with this. Just like I said, I had a unique experience over there during my time in 24 months. I loved it. It's a great club, but there's nothing like it in rugby league. There honestly isn't.
I'm watching Little Miss True win at 14 years old, win a gold medal in skating. Unbelievable on Channel 9 right now. And just a hot tip for you, I had a few complaints with people saying, well, when you watch the Channel 9 channel, you get delayed events, you get heaps of ads. If you download the Channel 9 app on your TV, you actually can go to any stream you want. So it's basically got a row of like, if you want to watch wrestling, you click on that. If you want to watch track and field, you click on that. And the best thing about it is that you get it, it's all live, and also there's barely any ads. So if you have the 9 Now app, you don't have to just look at the main 9 channel where you're getting delayed. Because like what happens basically is the main 9 Now channel will pick different things and decide, okay, we're going to play this now, we're going to play that now, whereas all the other channels are just live feeds. And it's not crappy live feeds where it's like one camera. It's a fully highly produced, and you'll actually get like commentators that are American commentators. They're not necessarily Australian ones. It's the best ever. So that's my tip in regards to the 9.
So you would have seen Arissa True last night become the youngest ever medalist, not only gold medalist, but medalist for Australia. How good is that?
Gold medal, Arissa True, 14 years old.
It makes me feel like I wasn't successful enough in my life for her to be going out and getting a gold medal at 14 years old. I really got to have a good look in the mirror later on tonight.
Insane. Okay, let's get into our preview, shall we? Rabbitohs v the Storm. South team news. Walker returns after missing last weekend with a calf injury. Cheekamp replaces host in the centres. Mamazelas, Shaq Mitchell join the bench. Storm team news. Kamikamitha rejoins the side after missing the loss to Dragons last week. Big Nelson moves to the second row to cover Eli Katoa, who misses the game with a knee injury. Coates is still sidelined with a hamstring injury. How do you see this one, Scope?
Yeah, they were brave last week, I thought, South Sydney. Granted, Cronulla gave them a number of opportunities for the game, but I thought if Cody Walker was playing that game, I reckon that game's a little bit closer, or even that could have been one of, trumped or been right up there with the upset that the Dragons had against the Melbourne Storm. Donald trumped. But the Storm, Tui's, he's become a very reliable part of this Storm team. Yeah,
so underrated.
To be put in the leadership group at the start of the year says a lot about how far he's come in that team. Big Nels. I think there's a world in which Nels loves sitting out on the back row more so than the middle these days.
What do you reckon's been going on in Big Nels's year? What do you reckon? Like, because he has been nowhere near as damaging as we know he can
Yeah,
be.
I just think from an outsider looking in, I think there's a level of comfortability with Big Nous. He's been there for a while now. He's won a couple of competitions. I think maybe, you know what, whenever we praise Craig Bellamy and the culture down at Melbourne, we talk about the 1%ers. And when I first seen Nous at the start of the year, I thought, this is playing, by the way, this is, you know, after spending some time in New South Wales Cup, probably a couple of kilos heavier than what he was or the best version of Nelson. And I just think Melbourne identified that. They would have seen it firsthand. He's had a couple of niggling injuries, which is associated with age as well, which happens as you get a little bit older. But I just think they've got standards down there. Yeah. And maybe now's just come back a little bit underdone. He seems like he's on the right path now. You know, they're sort of saying all the right things. He's proven it by, you know, starting in the lineup a little bit more. So I think that's where Big Nous is. They've got certain standards down there, and now he gets the opportunity in the back row. And like I said, he's so damaging out there. Oh. Pardon me. Poor Cody Walker, he comes back on the left edge, and you've got Big Nelson on the right.
Honestly, in the history of the game, he may be the last person you want lining up as a half. Looking across, seeing Nelson Solomona. Yeah,
I would say in the history of rugby league, and unfortunately I had to come up against him. SBW would be right up there. Sammy Burgess would be another.
Yep.
And then Big Nous, I think that's the top three. In terms of edges, you just want nothing to do with.
Absolutely nothing to do with. Are the Storm the real deal this year, all the way?
I think they're clearly the second best team behind Penrith. And then I've got a significant gap from Penrith. I think Penrith are the team to beat, and despite where they're sitting, only one game behind after slipping up against the Dragons, I think it's clearly the Storm are number two. My question marks around the Roosters are still there. I think they're three, and then I think there is a bit of a bracket of 3 or 4 teams in that sort of 4th, 5th, 6th spot.
Okay, alrighty, on to Titans versus the Sharks, Friday 6 p.m. Seabus Super Stadium. Now, this game actually, there's a lot riding on it because Titans can still make the 8. So the Titans team news, Cleese Haas replaces Vermeer, who's out with a bruised kidney. AJ Brimson is named 18th man for the 3rd straight week. Shark team news, Trindle's hamstring injury sees Blake Brayley moved to halfback. Cam McInnes shifts to hooker. I think what you'll see is similar probably to what you saw when they went down and played Melbourne, where Brayley actually defended at half but played hooker, and Cam McInnes almost just played like a 13 link man in the middle.
Yep.
Jack Williams comes in at lock. Hazelton returns from a foot injury on the bench. Young hooker Jaden Beryl joins. Young hooker. Jaden Beryl, old veteran, 29-year-old, actually has been busting his ass for 10 years. He joins the bench for his 2nd NRL game after debuting in the round 21 against the Cowboys. How do you see this one?
Titans are my watch.
100%.
I'm on heavy Titans watch. And so I break down the last 5 games. So this is huge. Every game's huge when you're chasing your tail after the start of the year that they had. But they got the Sharks and Dragons. They're a great opportunity against the Sharks team that's banged up right now to get a win. Next week they've got the Dragons. That'll be huge. The week after they've got the Roosters, which will be highly emotional due to what happened with David Fafita this year. The one positive that they've got, they'll take Newcastle. They play Newcastle second last round. And depending on how those results, if they're able to jag 3 out of the 4, they get Penrith last round.
Who will rest most likely?
You would think. Yeah. Now, you brought up a great point with regards to the Cowboys take last year, where I thought Penrith were going to rest all their players, but you highlighted, and I've given you credit for this, when Scott Drinkwater pointed at Dylan Edwards in that game when all the players were rested during Origin. I think that's the only reason Penrith played all their players in the last round. And therefore, I think on this occasion, unless I go back and watch some tape and film of the Titans in the way that if they did anything to pee off the Panthers, then I think the Panthers will rest their players, and that could be a really crucial game at the back end of the season. And as for the Sharks, they're just missing too many troops. I think Ronaldo Mulatalo is it's underrated how important he is for this team.
Yeah.
And just like Nico.
He's almost like Brian Toto, but to the Sharks.
Yep.
And he may not put up the same numbers coming out of his own end, but he's the heartbeat. He sets the trend for every single set.
Do you remember the Melbourne game? Did you remember the Melbourne game after they'd finished that game? They had that really big win. Yep. He was the guy that got all the plays in after the game, and he had a really big chat to him out on the field when they pulled off that historic win without Nico, without Braden Trindle.
Yep. No, he's huge for him. Absolutely huge, Ronaldo. And, it's going to be interesting to see with the Sharks because they're such a side that they prove if you can bank up wins early, you can afford to, they're still sitting essentially in the top 4.
Yeah.
And they're without their main player. Whereas it would be panic stations right now if they didn't bank up as many wins as they did. I like the Sharks. I think they get unfairly criticised. I think that, yes, are they close to the top tier with your Penrith and your Storm? Probably not. But at the same time, we have to remember where this club was. This isn't a big club with a bunch of resources, with a huge, huge fan base. It's a battler club. And they've basically been in finals footy ever since Craig Fitzgibbon took over. And they're currently sitting in top 4. Granted, I understand their last 8 games haven't been the best when it comes to their record. But as I said, look at all of these other clubs with incredible rosters that are in and out of the, you look at the Rabbitohs, you look at the Eels, you look at the Broncos, the Warriors, look at all those rosters, whereas the Sharkies have managed to stay in finals footy for the last 3 years. I don't think they get enough credit for what they do, the Sharkies.
It's a good point. Fitzy's reign, right? They were second in his first year. I think, did they end up finishing 5th in year 2? Because they had the Roosters potentially first week of finals last year, and now they're currently sitting at 4th. So you could argue outside of Penrith and Melbourne, they've been the 3rd most consistent team.
Yeah.
In the during Craig Fitzgibbon's reign, and my concerns are more. Yeah, they've been consistent, but are they a true contender? And no, I don't think they're a true contender.
Yeah, I think Adam Fanua-Blake arrives and that changes for me.
So do I. Yep.
But as I said, not everyone can be a contender. I don't think they get enough credit for where they do land. They're landing in finals. They've been their lowest position since Fitzgibbon has arrived has been, I think, 5th last year.
Yep.
2nd the first year. They'll hopefully land top 4, top 6 this year. I tell you what, as a fan, if I was supporting a club that went 2nd, 5th, and 4th or 5th again, I'd be like, I'm pretty happy with that. Granted, I'd love to go better than that. And this is, as I said, this has come from a Broncos fan where we've gone Spoon, 14th, 9th, 2nd. Now we're going to get 14th or something like that. And look at the roster they've got. So I don't think the Sharkies get enough credit. For the Titans, I think they've had so many false starts over the year. I think they've finally bought in to Desi Hasler football.
Yeah, so do I.
I think they've finally got what he wants.
There's a few little tweaks that they've made, but the biggest one is, and it was sort of forced as well. It's similar to what we were talking about at Serraldo, where he had to force his lineup to accommodate the playing roster that he had. And that change has coincided with Jaden Campbell being moved to 5'8", Foz taking the reins at half, and the emergence of Keanu Kinney.
And Tino being injured as well. You can't rely on him to do all the tough stuff.
Correct.
In the middle.
Yeah, and they've almost gone to that small ball off the back of not having Tino as well. I know David Feeder and Beau Fermor are big players, but Aaron Clark moving from lock, an interchange player to lock, starting off as a hooker. Now he's their starting front rower.
Yeah.
So he's tweaked his roster ever so slightly, and they still have AJ Brimson lingering there as 18th man and uncertain about where he's going to play. The outside backs have made it really hard for AJ because not only has Jaden Campbell played really well at the 6 and Keanu Kinney at fullback, you would have assumed if they were to lock down those positions, he'd go straight back into centres. Well, Brian Kelly's playing unreal, and Phil Sammy has moved well from the wing to centres, with Jojo Fafita being arguably their most consistent player over the last 4 weeks. So it's a really good position for Desi right now at the top.
Just before the break, we got a text here. Heaps of ads on 9 Now, guys. That's our point, mate. If you go to the 9 Now app, you can actually scroll across and choose which event you want to watch, and there are basically no ads. Let's get straight into it, shall we? Eels versus Panthers. Friday, 8 p.m, Combank Stadium. Eels, no changes to last week's side. Panthers team news. Dane Laurie returns after missing the win over the Knights with a head knock in the only change from the side last weekend. Look, the Eels, I know it almost seems a bit crazy without Mitchell Moses, but they have something weird with the Panthers where they somehow get up. And we saw them last week beat the Warriors as well. Don't get me wrong, I'm definitely backing the Panthers in this one, but there is something weird about this Eels side in the Panthers.
The regular season record is not that bad from the Eels, considering
the best at anyone.
Yeah, how dominant the Panthers have been in the last 3 or 4 years. I wish this rivalry was bigger.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up in Western Sydney, so I grew up playing in the Penrith district, and then made my debut at the Eels. I think that's a part of the game that we miss, true rivalries. Like Roosters and Rabbitohs have got it, but, there should be more, Broncos versus Gold Coast, Eels versus Panthers.
Cowboys versus Broncos used to be pretty big.
Yeah.
Not as big recently, but it used to be around one every year.
Yeah, there used to be there was a 5 or 6 year period where the games were so close that made it really entertaining to watch, right? You think that the Eels maybe wasted their ambush last week against the Warriors, and then vice versa with the Panthers. They nearly got done by the Knights at home last week. So if there's ever a reason for the Panthers to be switching on, it is this week against one of their Western Sydney rivals. So I think Panthers will be disappointed in the way they played against Newcastle, and unfortunately, it'll be at the dismay of this Eels team.
Panthers, me personally anyway, I've never experienced having to cover a team as good as the Panthers. Because even the Melbourne Storm, when they would win their premierships, would have lulls in their seasons where you'd go, oh crap, Storm are done. I mean, that's the age-old joke, isn't it? Every year we say the Storm are done.
Yeah.
Whereas the Penrith Panthers, I've never had to cover a side where there's almost nothing to talk about. It's like, oh, Nathan Cleary killed it again. Isaiah killed it again. Like, all the good players killed it again. The most exciting thing about the Panthers to talk about is their young blokes coming through.
And their opponents.
Yeah.
When you talk about Panthers game, this makes so much sense. We talked about the Knights in detail, and then I sort of just in a throwaway comment talked about the Panthers. I was like, sorry, Panthers fans. Well, it's the same old Panthers. Despite not playing well, you found a way, and the Prince comes up with a big moment and wins the game. It's almost a bit boring talking about them because they're so successful and they're doing such a good job, which I guess if you're a Panthers fan, you're not too worried, I suppose.
Well, it's getting to the point when I speak about them, I nitpick them now. And I say to the audience, I say I'm nitpicking.
Okay.
For example, Cleary's defence. He actually, defensively, his reads can be quite, it's normal. But for him, when he came back, he let in 3 tries.
Yep.
In the grand final, he actually let in 2 or 3 tries. And so that's just a sign of one of the greatest sides the greatest side. I think it's the greatest side ever assembled. Now, granted, I think that there are other teams in a one-off game where I wouldn't know who would win.
Yeah.
But when it comes to greatest teams ever assembled across the season,
consistency,
it's got to be the most. In the salary cap era, 3 premierships on the trot, 4 grand finals. I think it's the greatest team ever assembled. Raiders of the Seagulls, Saturday, 3 p.m, GIO Stadium. Raiders team news. Strange returns at 5/8 after being rested last weekend. Zach Hosking will miss the rest of the season with a shoulder injury, meaning Ata Mariota joins the bench. Seagulls. Hopewadi returns from a facial injury on the wing. Talau back to the centres. Croker makes his long-awaited return from concussion symptoms at hooker. Olakawatu makes his first start since his suspension in Origin 3. What do you reckon about this one, Scope? Because both teams, heaps to play for. Seagulls, they actually, at their best, they should be playing for a top 4, as in that should be their goal.
Yep.
But in reality, they're actually playing for a top 8. Like, they actually could drop out of the top 8 if they don't win their next few games.
Yeah.
And then you've got the Raiders, who, Ricky Stewart's Raiders, you can literally never, ever count them out, and they could also make the 8.
Feel sorry for Zach Hoskins, first and foremost. He just can't stay healthy.
Oh.
He's one of those players, he's a bit of a late bloomer, which I love. I always associate myself as being a bit of a late bloomer myself. So when I see he's got so much potential, but he just unable to stay on the field. I think this is the best lineup that Manly have been able to field this year outside of Tolu Kola, who's still missing. I think he is critical in him being back in there will also help our chances for Manly moving forward as we get to the finals if he's able to return. But geez, this is a strong lineup.
You know what? The question I have for Manly now is all the teams around you have taken a step up.
Yep.
The ones that you should be competing with your doggies and all that kind of stuff. You guys need to take a step up too. I think you can't afford to go. You can't afford to continue playing at the level you can be playing at, even though it's been getting the job done. I think we need to start seeing finals footy Manly this week.
Yes, and that's why I'm a little bit hesitant to declare them against Canberra down there when they should be deserved favourites. Because the last time I seen Manly, it was brave, but I was underwhelmed. Because I thought there was a clear gap between, like I said before, in my opinion, the third best team in the competition. That at the time was coming fourth in the Sydney Roosters, and Manly, who were fifth at the time and only 1 point behind them. Roosters completely blew them off the park in that first 15 to 20 minutes and looked far superior. But Manly showed some grit, some
Which
stuff,
is good. Which
some
is
stuff,
good to see.
yeah, some great traits that Manly are known for. But in saying that, I was like, I think there's levels, and I think Roosters are a level above them.
Yeah.
They get a chance now. Hamoli Olakau'atu is a huge part of this team now, and how he opens up the field for Daly in particular, and therefore Tommy to do his best work at the back. This is a crucial game for Manly. I want Manly to go down to Canberra, a really tough place to play against a gritty team, and I want them to put on a solid performance.
And they can too. They have been down at Canberra, and they have put them to the sword before.
Yeah, but I don't even need to see them put them to the sword, because I think Canberra are a better team than what they were last year, even though they made the 8 last year as well. At that point, I think both these two teams are going to be gritty. It's like walking away from that Bulldogs and Raiders game on Sunday. You walked away going, both teams left it out there.
Yeah.
You didn't need the Bulldogs to beat them 13+ to show that they're a candidate for a top 4 this year, and you didn't need the Canberra Raiders to beat the Bulldogs in order to say, hey, that's still a good team down there in Canberra. And I want to see a similar performance from both these teams. I'm going to go Manly with my allegiances, but hoping that they can put in a really good performance.
Yeah, I think with Manly, what I loved about the Roosters' performance, and this is a glass half full kind of look at it, because glass half empty is you got blown off the park by a team that you should be in that tier. Like them, Manly at their best should be in the same tier as Roosters right now, because I think Roosters are just a tier below Storm and Penrith.
Yep.
So that's the negative look at it. The positive look at it is, I think the one question I've had on the Manly forward pack inside is, are they gritty? Are they tough? When they're getting bullied a little bit, do they hang in there long enough to fire a shot back? And I think they did that against the Roosters. They hung in long enough to fire a shot back. But the question is Manly heading into finals footy can't afford to get blown off the park in the first 20 minutes.
No.
They should be going out there and basically, I agree with you, mate. They don't necessarily need to go down to the Raiders and completely dominate them, but I do think they should go down there and basically, for at least 60 to 70 minutes, we should be saying the Manly Seagulls have this game under their control.
Yes.
A very convincing, strong, solid win. The last thing I think you need as a Manly fan right now is for them to go down there and it's a shootout. And before you know it, there's 5 minutes to go and DCE does something incredible just to get you the win.
See, exactly right. I would prefer them to go try for try rather than 2 tries, 3 tries, 2 tries, 3 tries, because then that shows inconsistency for me. This is and look, the Raiders have still got their season on the line as well. Ricky said after the game last week that it was he was always looking for an opportunity to rest Ethan Strange.
Yep.
He's done that. He's straight back in the team. Ethan Strange was reluctant. He didn't want to be rested. He wanted to play footy. So I think that'll serve him well for this game as well.
All righty, let's get on to the Cowboys v. the Broncos. What a dangerous game for the Broncos, because you've got a Cowboys team that also could make the top 4 if they push for it towards the end of the year. Yes, they were a bit lackluster against the Tigers. I get that. But when they needed to click into gear, they did with the Tigers. And you've got a wounded Bronco right now. Yeah. And Cowboys love nothing more than a wounded Bronco just going, how good would it be to bring the Broncos up here and absolutely towel them up and say, see you later, big brother. And the Broncos at the moment, the whole of the rugby league community has been waiting for that game where we go, oh, okay, now the Broncos have decided that they're ready to go. It's never come. It's never come. And I don't think this week is going to be any different, unfortunately.
I agree. I think this is a really big statement game for the Cowboys. I really like what they were doing before they ran into the Tigers, but I can understand the complacency, especially when Justin Olam got sent for the field. And I know it sounds weird to people, but I've been out there in those positions before when you know you're just going to win, like it's going to happen. And the frustrating part is when the opposition doesn't go away, when they're a lesser team, they've got lesser talent, and they're just making it, ugly for you. And there are a few things where you try to take a few shortcuts, and that's what I think happened against the Tigers when Olam got sent off. Before that, I thought there was some real intent in the physicality that they were showing. I think they turned the corner in a lot of ways defensively. Again, I keep going back. I feel like they dropped those standards for 80 minutes last week, but I think they very quickly, at home, against a Broncos outfit that are missing players, but are a genuine threat, I think we see the best version of the Cowboys this week.
Yeah, big game, and the confidence that they can build. Because the thing is, if you get a scalp against the Broncos, it's still a scalp against a team with top-tier players in it. So it's not like a normal scalp of, they're currently coming 14, so it doesn't really matter. It's the Broncos. It's a confidence builder.
Well, I highlighted the Dragon scalp of the Broncos about 5 weeks ago. Even though they were outside of the top 8 and they won't get attributed as beating a team within the top 8, I thought that was a great sign for the Dragons 5 or 6 weeks ago when they beat the Broncos.
Yeah, absolutely. Sharkies as well when they beat the Broncos. Cowboys, you just want to see grit and you just want to see physicality. That's what I want to see from them, because when it comes to their attack, Scotty Drinkwater is on fire. He is on fire. Like the game against the Tigers, some of those little deft touches, the kicking behind the line, and they've always been okay with creating points. It's just been their defence. And their best year when they nearly got to a prelim, their defence was their weapon. And I think they need to find a way to get that defence sorted before they head into. And I think actually when you look at the start of the year compared to like the last 10 games or whatever, their defence actually has improved quite a bit. Because when you look at their points overall, they're actually, defensively, they're like the 15th best team. Overall the whole season.
But the first 10 weeks were awful, weren't
Exactly.
they?
Whereas if you look at the last, 6-7 weeks, I think they fall into the top 8 there. So that's the thing they've just got to keep pushing forward. But, we'll see. Hopefully the Broncos can pull it together. Unfortunately,
Can you see any way in which, with everything that's going on right now, they're able to galvanise and somehow getting away too? Could be a factor. Go up to North Queensland.
Well, I'm tipping them.
Yeah.
Because
sounds like reluctantly.
with my heart. The only way I see the Broncos galvanising is if they completely cocoon themselves, as in the playing group, even away from the coaching staff and everything, and just be like, boys, this is about us. It's not about anyone else. We're the ones on the field that everyone's criticising. We're the ones on the field that take the most heat. We need to play for each other here. If they can do that and don't allow themselves to kind of get, pulled apart by everything happening outside, then maybe they could pull off something. But
I've been in a team like that before, where we've done it all despite the situations that are surrounding, where you go as a playing group, no matter what, it's our reputation, that's our name on the line. No one cares about the circumstances in and around the club, whether it be front office, coach, whatever. You end up just ripping in and just having each other's back, and that's what they're going to need to do, the Broncos.
Well, look at the Rabbitohs have done. It was a disaster start of the year, and then they got to a certain point where they said, you know what, boys? Let's just go and enjoy it. Let's go and enjoy it. And I think that hopefully the Broncos can look at the positives of what they've got going on and just go, okay, look, we're not going to make finals here, but life's good. We're playing footy. We get to play for the Broncos. It's 80 minutes a week. This is what we're made to do. Let's enjoy it. I think sometimes you get a bit too caught up in the whole, professionalism of it all and all the pressure, and it's a business. And when you can't make the finals, in reality, all you can really lean on is it's 80 minutes of something I enjoy. Let's just go out and rip and tear for 80 minutes and whatever happens. And I think the Rabbitohs have done that perfectly, because they've been essentially out for quite a while. Like, I know they could have technically made it a few weeks ago, but they've been out for quite a while now, and they've actually put together some really good performances, the Rabbitohs.
Yeah, I was expecting a dramatic drop-off, especially when they were missing both Latrell and Cam, but they put together a couple of good performances, knocking off. I know it was the Tigers, but the Tigers had pretty much the full complement of players. I think, Appy missed that game, actually. But Cam Murray, he's back. He's going to lead the team well. We know what to expect from Cam. So you're right. That's the mindset they're going to have to take.
I mean, if you had said to me before round one, the Dragons v Bulldogs might be the biggest clash of the whole bloody year, I would have said, you're living in a bloody fantasy land, mate. But a massive credit to both clubs. What an amazing turnaround. And they've got some of the best fan bases literally in the game. And it's already sold out. You can already kind of feel the anticipation for this clash, especially with how much the Bulldogs celebrated their win against the Raiders. This is a big clash. It's very rarely do you feel the build-up for just a normal club game, unless it's like a grand final rematch. Whereas this one, you can genuinely feel in the rugby league community that there is an intensity building towards the match. And I think we're going to see a standard of footy, at least intensity-wise, finals footy intensity.
Yeah, I agree. I think no matter what fan you are, I think this would be your second favourite game if it's not your first favourite game of the weekend and you're a Bulldogs and Dragons supporter. I think there are a number of fans and teams players that'll be watching this game closely. It's crazy to think. These two teams were in my bottom four at the start of the year.
Yeah.
And I love it when I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I honestly do. You know, when
Yeah.
the worst part of, sometimes what we do is predictions. I love the predictions of trying to predict the top four and being right because I want to be right.
Yeah.
But I love being wrong in the bottom four. And when you see teams exceed expectations, coaches that exceed expectations, I was always confident in Flano, but I thought it was going to take at least another year. And with Ciro, he copped a lot last year. He really did. With the success of what Andrew Webster was doing at the Warriors, it really highlighted or put him under the microscope even more. But what a job he's done. And this is, in my opinion, this is the battle for the Coach of the Year.
I see, like Serraldo's already won it for me.
I think it's a 70-30 Serraldo.
Okay.
Because if Serraldo wins, it's over. Because then he's a genuine shot, or the Bulldogs are a genuine shot at the top four. But if the Dragons are able to close the gap by 2 points, like this is a 4-point swing basically too. So that'll put the Dragons on 28 points, the same as what the Bulldogs are
on. It's crazy. And just back to your point in regards to you love being wrong. As someone that talks about the game week in, week out, and I have done for years now, there is nothing I enjoy more as a person that talks about the game, and when I get excited to come in on a Monday and talk about rugby league, then talk about a team that was at the bottom of the table that's moving up the table. Like that's the most enjoyable part of my job. So when I predict the team to be a bottom four side, I want to be wrong because that is seriously, I would way rather talk about the Bulldogs and the Dragons and their journey to the top 8 than the Penrith Panthers and the Melbourne Storm at the moment.
Yep.
Not because I like those clubs more. It's the narrative. It's a story. Whereas the Storm and the Penrith Panthers, like, they're just great already. Like, they're already great. What can I add to that narrative? Whereas when I talk about the Dragons or the Bulldogs, I can explain to a lot of fans that aren't as involved in the game, this is how far they've come. That a fan that isn't involved in the game, they may not have known that the Bulldogs, 20 of their squad members were moved on last year. They may not have known that they had the second worst ever attack in the club's history last year. They may not have known that Benny Hunt was out the door last year at the Dragons. All these little things I enjoy the most, and that's why I love the Dragons-Bulldogs clash. In regards to this, I think this is going to be a spiteful clash.
Yes,
I think that Flanagan's going to make it personal. There was even a report where basically the report was, and not confirmed, but the report was that Flanagan was a bit miffed that the Bulldogs didn't even consider him, and they went straight to Serraldo.
Seen that?
Again, not confirmed, but it all adds to the narrative, all adds to the yarn, and we know Flano's all about the yarn and the narrative.
Yeah, he's really good at that stuff.
He's so good at that. I think it's going to be an extremely physical game. I just wonder, is the Ben Hunt factor going to be the difference? You look at the halves and you go, okay, Matty Burton, been really good this year. Sexton also been really good. There's been whispers that Broncos are after him, which I actually don't mind as a Broncos fan. But Benny Hunt, he is still that tier above in the spine. Could that be the difference?
Yeah, the two skippers are going to be crucial, right?
Yep.
I think they're levels above everyone else in this game. Ben Hunt, we know what to expect from Dozer. No matter where the Dragons have been, he is. I think he would have been a top 10 Dally M poll.
Yep.
Been a part of the top 10 now for a number of years, even despite how poorly the Dragons have played. And Stephen Crichton, the job that he's done as a skipper over the Bulldogs has been unbelievable. So, yeah, the two skippers are going to be crucial in this game. I'm siding with the Bulldogs, and purely because of that really random win-loss record that the Dragons have had since round 9.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. I try to convince myself into the Dragons last week against the Storm with that win-loss, and I didn't. So therefore, I took the points though.
Okay.
The points. There was too many points. There's too much start there to be taken.
Wasn't it like 18 or something?
18 and a half.
I took the start as well.
Yeah, but for those reasons, I'm going to go to the Bulldogs.
I am going to go. I think I'm going to go to the Bulldogs just because they've been more consistent, and But when I look at those two teams on paper, they're pretty similar. Like
They've only been consistent by one more game, like 2 points. That's all that separates them.
But Bulldogs' defense is the second best defense in the competition.
Yep.
So when they've lost, they haven't lost. You put it this way: you've pretty much got to score like 16 to 20 points against the Bulldogs, which I think they're averaging about 17 points defensively a game. And that's the one thing. Like defense, you can always bank on defense.
Well, here's what separates them. So they're 2 points away on ladder, as in one win. Bulldogs for and against is plus 92. The Dragons is minus 90. 180 points separates them, with only one victory for the Bulldogs in front of the Dragons. That is a crazy stat.
And just shows you that when the Dragons are good, they're great.
Yep.
When they're bad, they're terrible.
So Bulldogs 13 plus. Then that's where we're going.
No, I'm not getting on the 13 plus. Not getting on 13 plus. Look, I'm going to go the Bulldogs, but look, don't count this Dragon side out, especially with Benny Hunt. We saw what they did down in Melbourne. The worry is that they get complacent. They had their big win. They got revved up. They went down to Melbourne, and they come out and play like an absolute busted against the Bulldogs.
There's going to be too much emotion in this game for that to happen, right?
Surely.
Yeah, there is. I think there is. Playing at Cogra, selling it out. You know what the Bulldogs did at Belmore last week. Those are all factors. This is going to be a cracker.
Could there be a game this year where the Bulldogs finally run out of steam, being a smaller side?
No, I don't think so. I've seen enough of it now. I think I've seen enough evidence of them understanding exactly who they are, and I can't see a world in which we just talked about where the Dragons, where they completely fall off the cliff. I think they're too competitive now. They're too clear in their systems, and I can see a world in which the Dragons beat them, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's going to be a dramatic victory for the Dragons. I think it's going to be a really close one either way.
Because mid-year or even let's say around 7 to 14, I was waiting for that game with the Bulldogs.
So was I.
I was sitting there going, look, it's been incredible. How good. We all love that great story. But eventually there's going to come a game where they are just so flat, they get absolutely dominated, and then their confidence goes. And they just haven't. They literally just haven't. Like every single week, they become such a sure bet, a safe bet to, even if they don't win, the game is close. Or, they went to Penrith and lost 16-10. Penrith lost 16-10. That's for a club in the position where they were last year to this year, that's amazing. And then you look at some of the games against the Melbourne Storm and that, they were very close losses.
There are a couple of games at the start of the year too that I thought they were showing some signs of, all right, this is improved. Yep. One was Parramatta. Parramatta ended up blowing them out, but it took 60 minutes.
Yeah.
And that was before they established who they were. And the other game was when they played the Cronulla Sharks, lost Poasa Famusuli in the first carry of the game.
Yeah, first carry, head knock.
And then had a few really rough calls in that game. Because we caught it here for SEN, and I was like...
where they, I think it was Jesse Ramian or Katoa that looked like he kicked it, but he didn't hit the ground first, I think.
Yes, that one. And Kikau ran into the referee, or someone ran into the referee, and that try was disallowed.
Yep.
And then the Cronulla Sharks took it the other way and ended up scoring. It was a 12-point swing. So, they showed signs of it without getting the results, and now they're getting the results. So, you're right. They're the more consistent team. But really looking forward to this because I think it's a genuine coin flip. I think it's a genuine 60-40 split to the Bulldogs for me in this game. Yeah, Tavita Pangai Jr. and Cody Nikoruma are big returns. The Dolphins, I feel like the Dolphins were really affected by that breakdown that they had against Penrith a couple of weeks ago. So off the back of that, they've had the lead in all three of their last games going into the second half.
Yeah. And
then completely just fallen off. Look, they're a lot better against the Roosters. I think they're going to be better for this year, but then you take in, the significant drop that they could potentially have with Wayne Bennett moving on. The Warriors, this is a very hard game to read, actually. Tuivasa-Sheck moves back into the centres. They were trying to get him more ball, a little bit like what the Dragons were doing with Zach Lomax, putting him on the wing and then allowing him to get in for those scoots. It's a very tough game to pick, this one. I'm leaning towards Dolphins just because they're at home, but with no confidence.
I went the Warriors. I don't know. SJ retiring. I feel like the Warriors can be a side that can get up with emotion. And I think that with everything going on, and I know they still technically can make it, and SJ retiring, it might be enough emotion at least to get like a couple of weeks out of him.
Okay.
Because at the moment, they're quite juicy. I think they're paying $3, which is not bad at all. And with this Dolphins side, they've been gritty, they've been gutsy, they've had so many injuries to key positions. Like, it's been incredible. The fact that they've gotten to where they're at, I do just get a tiny sense of fatigue creeping into their game. I think that the games that they narrowly lost, obviously the Penrith Panthers, obviously the Roosters, I think that if they played those games maybe 10 weeks ago, they probably win.
Yeah, I agree.
Just with that energy that they have early in the season. And I think that they're getting to a bit of a point now where they had so many injuries to key positions that it's just showing a bit of signs of fatigue. So I'm probably just the Warriors, I think.
Yeah, good point. One thing that's hurt him is not only the Jeremy Marshall-King injury, who has been outstanding since he's been up there and extended, but you move Max Plath, who I think's got a huge future. I think Max Plath is going to be, he'll be wearing a Maroons jersey, I reckon, in the next couple of years. And he was doing so well being their link player through the middle and then doing all the tough stuff. He's almost like a bit like Ruben Cotter for the Dolphins. So, therefore, he's moved into dummy half. That's, even though he was really good last week, it takes away a little bit from what they're able to do in the 9 jersey.
Well, just the speed through the middle. You know, when he's playing 13, he's got such quick leg speed because he's a former half. And so the amount of times during like Isaiah does it perfectly where he's the link man, but he'll identify when a set needs a bit of almost like an injection of speed, and he'll just take the ball and run it.
Yep.
And I think Max
get him
Psychoplath,
beyond the markers. Yep.
The Psychoplath, he does that, baby.
Psychoplath. I like that one. Yeah, he's that's a big part of it. What at home, I think is going to help. Spent a couple of weeks away now. Even the Titans game was at Suncorp. So, have you seen the former Roger Tuivasa-Sheck in his first year back? It's like the Warriors, right? It's been up and down.
I think he's struggling to find his place in that side.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that at fullback, it comes naturally to him. Run the ball heaps and just get through a bunch of work.
Yeah.
I think at wing and centre, he's struggling to know when to do that and when not to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's not just him to blame. I also think Webster has also struggled because Webster seems like a very structured coach. I think he doesn't know how to get him involved as well, because there's been so many games where like Roger might have 7 runs and you're just going, surely you can find a way to get your best outside back the ball more than that.
Yep.
But because the structure is so set for the Warriors, the way they play, I think that they just haven't really been able to click as well as you would have hoped.
And I've seen some times where I've seen Roger come in also and the vice versa and come in and just look frustrated and sort of thrown everything out of whack.
Yeah.
Like, because he's looking at getting involved more. So you're right. It's a good point.
All right, we'll go to Knights versus Tigers. Aren't the Knights a bit of a weird side?
I think there'd be more pressure under the Knights if it wasn't for the Broncos, the Parramatta situation, the Rabbitohs at the start of the year.
They went on this run. They won 4 in a row, and it was the ugliest wins you've ever seen in your life. But they're winning. And that's all
that matters.
That's all that matters. And also, they're playing with grit. That's what they are. Steel City, all that. And then they have a couple of weeks where you're going, oh, my God. You're hearing talks about players getting tapped on the shoulder, Hastings getting dropped, and you're thinking it's going to be a disaster. And they come out, and they nearly beat the Penrith Panthers. And so I just don't know where I land with them. They started the year with Hastings and Gamble. Gamble gets dropped. Cogger comes in. Now, we're at the end of the year, and the halves pairing is the 2 least likely people, Crossland and Gamble.
Yeah.
Cogger's coming off the bench. Hastings playing 13 in New South Wales Cup. I just don't get it.
Tigers could beat them, eh?
They really could. They really could.
The Tigers could beat them. This is a game, if I'm Benji, boys, we might not get many opportunities, to finish off the season now. I haven't looked at the West Tigers schedule. Who else is on there? I've just got it here. I'm having a quick Beat. But, yeah, this is an opportunity for Benji to really galvanise this team. Look, Bunnies, chance with all the injuries they've got. Seagulls by Eels. Oh, they've actually probably got one of the better schedules, the Tigers, believe it or not.
And also, the Knights have a good schedule leading home too.
Yep.
So, look, I'm going to go the Knights. I think KP will bounce back. Had a little bit of a quiet game last week. Not quite, but you want him to get his hands on the ball a bit more.
They just can't inject him,
which is weird.
Respectfully to Crossland and Gamble, they just don't know how to bring him into the game.
Which is weird, because you would expect, if any 2 halves are going to give KP the ball whenever he wants it, it's going to be Crossland and Gamble.
Yeah.
So is KP being dominant enough? Is he demanding the ball enough?
He can probably go after a little bit more.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah.
So, I don't know. But it's going to be. I actually reckon it's going to be one of those bizarre matches that are actually quite entertaining.